Let's try it again. Good evening, everybody. That was so nice. Well, my name is Mr. Ulrich. I'm the Executive Director at Eagle Ridge Academy. And this is the State of the School Address. Eagle Ridge Academy has 2 State of the School Addresses each year, one in the fall and one in the spring. At each State of the School Address, we talk about classical education, because classical education is foundational to the mission and vision of Eagle Ridge. And for this one, we're talking about classical education, our academic performance from 2013-2014, and our special topic for tonight is to talk about the expansion, or get an update from the Strategic Growth Task Force. First of all, I'd like to recognize some people I want. If you're a staff member, can you please stand? Kind of look around here. Here's your staff for tonight. So meet them, get to know them a little bit. Thank you so much. If you're a board member, go ahead and stand up. Again, right? So we have board members here. We have our vice chair here, and we have our board chair, Ann Watanabe, and Missy Madigan. So thank you so much for coming. So tonight, I want to talk about the format a little bit. You're going to have 3 groups. There's going to be about a 15-minute presentation. After a presentation, like from the classical coordinators, you're allowed to ask questions, clarifying questions. And then at the end, we'll have a discussion. Okay? Same when I present on academic performance. Ask clarifying questions throughout. At the end, feel free to ask questions. We're going to do it a little bit different when we talk about the strategic growth, because we're going to have a panel up here of some board members, some staff, and members from the Strategic Task Force. So what we'll do is we'll do a presentation, ask clarifying questions throughout, then at the end the panel will come up, and you'll have the opportunity to write down any questions you may have on this index card, and at that time, just put them in the middle, and Ms. Powell right back here, she'll go grab those, and she'll come up here and kind of sort them by common questions and lead us through, and she'll lead us through a discussion, okay? We have, at any time, feel free to stand up, use the restroom, the men's restroom right back here to the left, my left, your right, and right back here to my right, your left. We have refreshments back here again, anytime. Go ahead and stand up and get something. Without further ado, we're going to start off with classical education. We've really grown a lot the last few years and matured a lot as far as it goes with classical education. This year is our first year in which we hired classical coordinators. They are teachers at Eagle Ridge Academy, and they are also responsible to ensure that we continue this pursuit of excellence in classical education. And I would like to introduce you to Ms. Sarah Sale and Ms. Missy Madigan.
Is basically what Sarah and I will be doing throughout this year. Looking at the classical teacher certificate program, organizing that, making sure it's running smoothly, getting all of the materials put together, and all of those kinds of things. Working on the mentor instructional programs that we have, so providing resources and input to teachers who need more classical methodologies within their classrooms and supporting them, coaching them through that as well. Looking at the administration team, working with them to put together opportunities to provide professional development both to them to support and continue that growth, as well as the staff as well. Making sure that that is remaining consistent with the mission and vision of Eagle Ridge. The evaluation system for teachers, making sure that that is aligned with the classical documents that we have and our methods of instruction. A lot of work done over the summer on both upper school and lower school with that. I think we're in a much better place now. We've made some significant modifications to those. Continue to work on that. Planning other professional development, like I said, with the admin and the teacher teams. Curriculum, making sure that what we are doing now is in line with what we want to do and making sure that that supports the mission and vision. Looking at new curriculum that's being presented, does that fit with what we're trying to do here in classical then facilitating the curriculum, what used to be the curriculum advisory panel is now a new board work group called CISA, so Curriculum Instruction and Student Achievement, providing input to the things we're working on.
And in order to meet these various goals that we have for the year, within the classical co-op that meets once monthly, this year we have identified 3 particular working groups, and these working groups will be completing tasks that are outlined by the classical co-op, and then bringing that information and resources and work back to the co-op for further discussion and implementation of those programs. Upon looking at what our greatest needs for the year were, we identified 3 areas for working groups. One would be parent education. So how do we get education to our parent community about what is classical education and what does that mean for Eagle Ridge? The classical education handbook group, and kind of creating our own handbook for what is classical at Eagle Ridge Academy, and for professional development, both for faculty, staff, and the community at large, what that will look like.
We'll next go through each of the individual groups. So we'll start with the parent education group. These are their goals throughout the year. So this is going to be a work in progress throughout this year, and kind of course correct throughout that time. Develop opportunities for intimate conversations with parents regarding classical education components. So making sure that parents are understanding what's happening here within the classrooms, within what the teachers are discussing as well. Develop a parent resource center, both online and in print for classical education, compiling those materials and then making them available for you. And then collaborating with other area classical schools to bring in speakers for presentations. It's quite expensive if we do it just at Eagle Ridge, and if we can work with other schools that are classically minded, similar in mission and vision to us, then we can kind of build that together and work as a larger community.
The action plans in order to fulfill those goals for the year that we are focusing on right now for the parent education group would be to create an online and print classical education resource center that parents could access. We are also working on parent book study groups for an introduction to classical education by Christopher Perrin. And we are also planning to have Christopher Perrin come to speak to the Academy at a speaking engagement to talk more about classical education. And one of those sessions in particular when he comes here would be to talk about classical education as a whole to parents and hopefully the parental role in fulfilling classical education as well.
This group has been quite active, and they'd actually like to announce at this time that their first book study is going to be on January 6th. It is a 4 to 6 time frame, so those of you that have lower school students can take advantage of that. It will be focused mostly on the introduction to classical education. It's a guide for parents by Christopher Perrin. There is a link here that will also be in the Eagle Eye next week, and that is, it's free as a PDF, so if you'd like to download it from there. It is limited to the first 20 parents. We'd like to keep that conversation intimate and not grow it too large from there. So it's the first 20 that sign up. Within the Eagle Eye next week, there's going to be a link to the Sign Up Genius, so get on that one right away. It's going to be a good time.
For the classical education handbook group, the goal here for this year is to create a handbook on classical education at Eagle Ridge Academy, so specific to our school. And that includes sections on how we do classical education at Eagle Ridge Academy at the School of Grammar, Philology, and Rhetoric, and why we've chosen to do classical education the way that we do. And we really envision this handbook as being a great tool and resource for teachers to access in order to improve their craft. We have so many teachers here that are striving to be better educators, and how can I take these different classical teaching methods and bring them into my classroom and really use them well? And this would be just a starting place or somewhere for them to go to get that information and be able to have these authentic conversations with other teachers to improve their craft of teaching here.
Their action plans, they are meeting monthly to assess the progress of that handbook. It's going to be a work in progress throughout the year. Looking at prioritizing what needs to be there and how to make sure that that all fits together with what we have. It's going to be compiling documents that they already have. These documents already exist. We're just going to put them in like a one-stop shop so that teachers can use that as an easier and quicker reference. A completed rough draft should be ready by January, and then we can look at the review process with the co-op as a whole.
And with the professional development group, the goal for this group is to provide and distribute literature to the PLC leaders to strengthen the focus on classical conversations within our professional learning community groups that we already have established at Eagle Ridge Academy, and to find different ways and avenues of engaging conversations about classical education and providing those resources and materials.
Our action plans would be to create a survey, and this has already been done. It's going to be distributed to PLCs to figure out what they think is going to be their highest learning leverage. There are lots of different concepts or modes of instruction within classical education, and we want to make sure that each PLC is getting what they need and what's going to be best for their teaching and for their students. Compiling all of that literature is going to take some time as well, and making sure that those resources are in line with Eagle Ridge's mission and vision and what we're doing with classical education. Any questions for us?
Can you tell us a little bit about the teacher classical certificate program?
This year we have begun with cohort A of the Eagle Ridge Academy Classical Education Teacher Certificate Program, and it will be a 3-year program where this cohort of teachers will be working together and taking a variety of courses to enhance their knowledge and understanding not only of classical education teaching methodologies, but also getting maybe a taste of what the students at Eagle Ridge Academy experience in their progression through classical education. So currently, teachers are enrolled in Classical 201, which is a continuation of discussion and thought on classical methodology, focused on the 7 laws of teaching, and Great Books 1, which would be the rough equivalent to what 6th grade does and 9th grade in the upper school, with ancient Greece and Rome. So we read excerpts from the Iliad and the Odyssey. We've looked at Plato so far, Oedipus and the whole Oedipus trilogy, and then that will continue on to Great Books 1 Semester 2, which would be the medieval world through the Renaissance. There will also be a Great Books 2 course, which follows up with the rest of history, as well as a course on music, virtue. There will be 2 classes on Latin and 2 classes on art, in which we will not only be learning some art history, but we may be practicing some hands-on art experiences, like creating an illuminated manuscript together, something that I know our high school students have done in the past. So it's a really great opportunity for teachers that either are very passionate about this or were fortunate enough to have the opportunity to take these classes either in high school or college to really see and kind of live the classical fine arts and great conversations, discussions with a group of peers. We started out with 30 members. We now have 27, so it's still quite a large group, and we meet every week for an hour and 15 minutes, so it is quite a time requirement, but it definitely seems like the time goes by pretty quickly when we're there.
It never really stops at that time as conversations continue. It's giving us a taste of what the students do so that we can continue not only those great conversations with our fellow staff, but with our students who are experiencing that exact same thing. Any other questions?
I have a question about your parent group, about the book, The Introduction to Classical Education. I applaud your efforts to get that started, but there's many parents here who are already quite familiar with classical education, and I think there's some parents that might be interested in that, but I'm also concerned if you limit it to 20, that you might have more parents you have a great many parents here who need an introduction to classical education, and perhaps if you're a little more open to perhaps having more than one section of that, like perhaps wait and see if you have a greater need and maybe you could have more than one facilitator. But secondly, perhaps that might be recommended or a required reading of all parents coming in new to the school, or as a requirement or a very highly recommended suggestion to parents who are applying for a lottery position so that they know fully what the school is all about.
Right, and looking at this is just the first opportunity. It's not going to be limited to this. And the idea within that group is to take these 20 and make them grow from there. not to take these 20 and make them this little separate group that's over
Right.
here that are all of the experts on classical. It's to take those 20 and make them advocates for what we're doing and go out and spread that message to those that weren't able to come. Or even that time frame, looking at holding it on a Saturday morning or during the day or in the morning so that other parents have different opportunities to do that as well.
There's quite a large crowd that came for the Andrew Kern presentation. So I would believe that the parents who came to that may not need to read that particular
That
book.
version. And the conversations that come out of it are also the fruits of what is really happening in that
Right.
text too. It's not just limited from within the covers of that book.
Missy, is my understanding the reason why you're limiting it to 20 is because you would like it to be Socratic discussion? You don't want it so large that it's a presentation of the material?
A presentation isn't really what they're aiming for. Unfortunately, Sarah's the leader of the handbook group, and I'm the professional development group, but Melanie can join in. From my understanding, it's let's keep it intimate so that we can all participate in that conversation. If it's presentation style, it's just give you the information. We want to really get into these conversations about it. It needs to be more of a discussion.
Exactly, and that was our intent, and our intent was starting with that first book. That's not the only book that we've talked about as well. So we've talked about looking at the Norms and Nobility book and breaking that down for parent discussion as well. There are lots of opportunities, but we have to start somewhere. And that with our group is a perfect place to start, especially since we're planning to have Christopher Perrin come in and making that connection for families so that we can announce that when we have that date finalized, we can announce that, and having those book study groups leading up, all the way through, leading up. And we do have more facilitators who are willing to be a part of that. And another piece of that was having this first group and seeing if there are parents from that group then who would like to facilitate for other parents in groups so that we can get parent involvement and parent volunteers as well within that. So the first group, where is he? Mr. Trips and I are going to facilitate the first group, and like Missy said, we'll have information in the Eagle Eye next week with the Sign Up Genius link and a little more information. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me about it as well.
What are we going to
All right, now's a good time to hop off on that topic. Okay, so again, my name is Jason Overton. Tonight I'm gonna talk a little bit about our academic performance. When we talk about academic performance, I'm gonna focus tonight mostly on MCAs. MCAs are the state tests. I focus on mostly reading and math, and also science. We'll talk a little bit about the ACTs, okay? And you're gonna see some great data up here. And when we talk about the MCAs and they get published in the Star Tribune, and we show people our scores, I need to be clear to you that we're very happy about our scores. We're pleased with those. But that's not what we're trying to do. The test scores is not what's driving us. We're not trying to let that drive us. So while we can celebrate that, it is not the main point. But tonight we do want to talk about it because we're held accountable to these standards. All right, by the Minnesota Department of Education, by the community, taxpayers, parents who are also taxpayers. All right. So first thing, Eagle Ridge Academy, comparing apples to apples. The Star Tribune and many like newspapers or reports, they'll show absolute proficiency score in math. An absolute proficiency score in reading. They'll say, Eagle Ridge Academy, 81% in reading. Okay? And they'll compare that to Minneapolis Public Schools, or Edina, or Eden Prairie. And I want to recommend to you, don't compare schools from something like the Star Tribune. You need to dig deep into the data to really compare schools to schools. So that's what we're going to do a little bit tonight. The best way to compare data is to compare apples to apples. Almost 10 years ago now, more than that, No Child Left Behind, all right, designated demographic subcategory groups. There was 8 of them, all right? Eagle Ridge Academy, and those groups were No Child Left Behind terms, not my terms, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, Native American, or American Indian, special education, and students receiving free and reduced lunch, and students receiving English language services, okay? So what we've done is we broke down our groups, because if you are going to compare schools, you need to compare like populations, all right? Now, when we talk about the population and demographics of Eagle Ridge Academy, if you look at our demographics back in 2008, 2009, we were about 90% of our students were white students, okay? Today, we have 35% of our students are students of color. Next year, it's predicted that about 45% of our students will be students of color. We are growing in diversity, and it's working. It's healthy at Eagle Ridge Academy. It's exciting, okay? So what we want to do is to be able to compare that, celebrate those pieces so you understand a little bit more. So we're going to talk about math, reading, and science. Now, okay, I'll explain this to you. I'm trying to get a lot of data on one chart. What this is math proficiency of us in neighboring schools. These school districts, this is where our students generally come from. We have students that come from a lot of other schools, but these are the major ones. Eden Prairie, Edina, Shakopee, Minnetonka, East Carver, Bloomington, and then I put the state. We want to see the state average. So, if you notice, and feel free to move up, because I notice it's tough to read from back there. Feel free to move up. Because right here are Eagle Ridge's different categories, okay? So, Asian, black, absolute means overall proficiency, free reduced lunch, and special education. Eagle Ridge Academy score is the gray, is the background. Does that make sense? Okay? And then you can kind of see, like, the bar is Eden Prairie, Edina, Shakopee. And then you can see the lines. The black one is Minnetonka, yellow is East Carver, Bloomington, and the state. All right? So you can see right here, what we're trying to do at Eagle Ridge Academy is isolate different groups, because every school has different demographics. So you don't want to compare absolute proficiency. That didn't look right. Okay. So if we look at Asian students, the majority of our Asian students are from East India. That's the majority of our Asian population. Asian population is defined as different in every school district. Okay. So if you can see where our students are performing in math for black. Now, I want to just put this in a context. The state average for black students, you saw this a lot during this political season, right? 33%. That's the average proficiency. Okay, so we have a crisis here. At Eagle Ridge Academy, we're at about 65%. If we compare to the state, that sounds great, right? What we're saying is 1 out of 3 of our black students aren't meeting the grade, so it's not okay. Okay? Absolute proficiency in math. We were in the top, dependent on decimal points, we're in the top 2 or 3 out of all K-12 public schools. Last year we were number 1, all right? But we're still in the top 2 or 3. Free reduced lunch. So students receiving free reduced lunch. That's where we're at compared. And then special ed. Our special ed department in the last 2 years has went from right a little bit above the state average to number 1 in the state pretty much across the board in math, science, and reading. Okay? And we're going to show a trend line in a little bit. questions on this? Any questions about the graph itself? Or the chart, I should say.
Chart of the day. Because the chart's
Every-
really pretty. You're gonna ask me, like,
Well, I got to tell you, I put the graph together, the data together, and then we had a staff meeting, and the colors were so no one could read it because they were so close, and the guy over there, Mr. Beck, made it all nice and pretty and rainbowy. So thanks for noticing.
what, so just looking at our special ed.
Yes.
Just to get a level set. Compared to other schools, our percentage of special ed kids
My question: the state average is about 13 to 14%.
per school.
Oh, yes. No, per
Per
district. No, the state average. If you take all the kids, all right? Now, you look at an Eden Prairie, they're at about 14%. You look at an Edina, they're right at about 10%. And we are between 9 and 10%. So we're right, I think we're actually 10%, right in line with the local schools and the state average.
Okay, thanks. And then, so can you explain a little more why Asians are defined differently? And does it,
What do you mean define differently?
well, you said Asians are defined differently from district to district.
Oh, I apologize. Maybe I wasn't clear. So you have you have what the federal government says Asians. Then, that could be Hmong, that could be Chinese, that could be Japanese, East Indian. So, you can't group all Asians as one group. Okay, right? So if you go to St. Paul, all right, their Asian population is mostly Hmong. Okay, you go to Yinghua, which is a Chinese immersion school, their Asian population is generally Chinese, right? So make it a little bit more clear?
Yeah, but when you say defined differently, it's not so much defined differently, but made up of different
Yes.
cultures and ethnic groups.
Correct.
Okay.
Like, for example, Somali students and East African students, East African refugees are put in black category. Yet we know there's different needs of African Americans compared to someone that's new to country. So that's why these categories got to be sometimes you want to dig deeper. Great question, Paul. All right, science. You understand the graph now. All right, you understand the colors. This is where we are for science. Okay? Absolute proficiency. Now, what I want to point out to you is look at who's around us. Minnetonka, Edina, Eden Prairie, some of the top schools. So that's who we're comparing to. In our charter school contract with Friends of Education, there is one goal in there. And the goal states is that we will score higher in absolute proficiency than our comparative school districts. Our comparative school districts are Eden Prairie and Edina. For Eden Prairie, we outscore Eden Prairie in every category, okay, across the board. All right? Edina, last year, they were ahead of us in reading and about the same for science. This year, we're the same for math. We're ahead in reading, and we're a little bit ahead. We're actually the exact same for science, just so you know comparative data. All right? However, what I want to point out is in a lot of we have a different population, different demographics. We have about 18 to 19% of our students receive free and reduced. Edina is 90%. Okay? The population, the number of black students in Edina, we have more, we have double the population. So our population is different when we talk about absolute proficiency. Why you need to look at the category. Reading. Now last year, we'll get into the trend data. Last year, there was a new reading test. The whole state took about a 20-point dive. All right? It's much more rigorous. It was aligned with the Common Core. And so really in Eagle Ridge Academy struggled. Even though last year I think we were number 3 or 4, this year we're number 2. Matamida is number 1. They beat us by 1 point. So, there's the data there. And you stop me at any time and ask questions, otherwise I'm going to keep going.
Can you go back, sorry, to science again? So absolute, we're even with Edina.
And then Tonka.
What is that?
Yep. So we're gray,
Oh, they're
Minnetonka's
black.
green,
Okay,
they're black.
okay. So absolute, that's across the board.
That's across the board.
But in every category except Asian, we're ahead
Right,
of both Minnetonka
right.
and Edina.
Because these groups here generally score lower, you can see from the data, and we have more students in those groups. That's why it's hard to look at absolute data. Even though our absolute data is just as good, we have more of what's termed the at-risk population. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Would the other reason be the white population isn't on any of these slides?
Right, I did not include the white population on any of these
So,
slides.
Paul, those would affect our numbers.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. Eden Prairie is at about 70, high 70s for number of 70% for number of white students. Eden Prairie, or what did I say?
You said Edina is 70%.
Yes. Edina is in the 80s, okay? High, mid 80s. So just different populations. That's why
What about ERA?
Eagle Ridge, well, like I was saying before, we're at about 65%, or about 35% students of color right now.
And next year it'll go down to,
Next year, students of color will be about 45%.
so why don't we 55?
Yes. Yep. If that trend continues.
And this, that count, I'm assuming, is all inclusive of all race, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So it's great.
Right. Now, in some larger districts, you'll see double filters for double groups. We don't have enough kids. Once you start doing double filters, then the data is unreliable. You get like 4 or 5 students. What we mean by that is to say, okay, how many students are receiving special ed services and also are receiving free and reduced lunch? So you'll see that in some districts. All right, reading. Did we already do reading? Okay, now I want to talk about the trend. We want to see where we've been and where we're going. Because we want to see growth, right? Growth is very important. So what we've done is we just took the last 5 years, and really just because the lower school came aboard, so we can compare again, apples to apples. Don't worry about this line here. It's for my own kind of information here. But the bluest state, and ERA is the black line here. So we were, for math, a couple points ahead of the state. Right? So we've really had some strong growth in the last 5 years. Going from being above the state average, which is nice, to really being one of the top schools in the state. We saw about a 5-point reduction this year in math. Realized we had the top score last year by 6 percentage points. So there was really it was going to be tough to go up. Right? Reading. Staff can't answer this. What happened here? What happened with that downward trend?
Reading test.
New test, right? So the whole state took a dive there. All right? Eagle Ridge Academy was about 15 points ahead of the state average, was below Edina and Eden Prairie. Okay? And right now, we're like 1 point ahead of Edina. All right? Last year, they were 1 point ahead of us. Yes, sir.
Feel free to say, we'll chat about this later, because I'm not sure what a whopper question is. If everyone in the state took a dive into the new test,
Yeah.
does that lead someone to believe that all that schools are teaching to the test? And that it's not really testing readability?
Well, one would argue, and I wouldn't be that one, okay, is that they're adhering to the more rigorous standards, which are now being assessed, okay? that make sense?
Nope.
So,
Who's they?
so the MDE adopted the Common Core for reading language arts, right? So what they've done is they've set those out, and they said, okay, we're going to test you on these. They let us know a couple of years in advance, this is coming. Schools don't respond to that, right? Okay, we'll believe it when we see it. We've seen that before. This test comes out. Boom, this happened in reality. Now they respond or react to that. They take those standards and they start integrating those new standards or different standards into the curriculum. Okay? Yes?
One question on that, Jason. Isn't the other, and I could be wrong, but doesn't the state norm the test to a certain percentage? So you automatically see a dip often the first year you do it because the state norms a certain number, like this is where we're going to start for passing? Like if you can see if you look at...
Somewhat. Because if that statement was totally true, the norm would change. The norm would, but the proficiency rating would change.
Correct, but the state does it the first year, is what I'm saying, which is why they take a large dip, which is why the state average the first year of the test is usually always around 56%. So when you look back...
Correct. It's always around 50%. 52,
Yeah.
53%. Correct.
And then they put schools above or below that depending on how they test.
Yep. Science. Okay. Yes.
You said that one of the Friends requirements is it that we exceed or we just meet matching
Exceed.
districts? So is there a plan at Eagle Ridge to increase our science scores and some mechanism in place to, if we're just like right there, neck and neck right now for
Well,
science?
there's always a plan, right, to continue to grow. And most of those plans come through professional learning communities, individual teachers setting goals, and their coaches helping them meet their goals. Realizing we're trying to do these MCA pieces, but that is not our main driving force at Eagle Ridge Academy. So when it comes to the academics, there's probably 20 different types of goals when it comes to academic performance. And we're exceeding the standard in most of those. So we're at no risk of that at all, as far as them having a problem with us being a point below.
Do you feel like
Edina.
the instruction that's happening in the classrooms is sufficient to meet the goals in science curriculum?
I don't feel it's sufficient. I think it's exceeding standard. I think the instruction that our science teachers are providing it's exceeding standards. It's outstanding. And you know what? It needs to continue to, we always try to continue to grow. So I think it's beyond sufficient.
Brandy? I would address that for Brandy in the lower school, and speaking of, one of the things you think about with us is we're a core knowledge school, and one of the things that we do not always do is adjust our education at grade level to match the standards. We try to keep it within our core knowledge sequence, so therefore some of those standards, we look through to see if we can touch base on them, but we're not doing the direct instruction for that at that particular grade level. They may have gotten it earlier, they may get it later, but they're still getting that instruction. And the other piece is, one of the reasons to go to the ERV test this year is because there's a science portion to that, so that's going to give us more information for teachers to look at curriculum and look at instruction for science in the classroom. So I think we do have a plan for looking at that. At least I can speak for the lower school.
One other thing I'd like to point out is there could have been a change in data from last year in science to the year before. We were missing an entire subsection of students last year for our testing average. We had 0 biology students test, so this score does not include any high school student scores at all, because we didn't teach biology last year due to the change to put chemistry freshman year. When you make that curriculum switch, we add a year without biology, so this year we will add back 75 students to these test averages that were taken out. And so a lot of times that high school test average can bring, it could bring the scores up, it could bring it down, but those are students who have been here a longer time. So
The one thing we did, where we're saying, is to put chemistry in 9th grade. Because in order to truly understand biology, you need to understand chemistry. And so our students were taking biology before chemistry. So we're thinking by this year, actually,
They'll test this year.
this year, that's really going to increase their overall knowledge, hence test scores. So that's a major piece. It's also going to help beyond the MCAs. Remember, the MCAs are big. That's a basic standard, right? That's this level right here. What we're trying to do is really go to the ACT, those college prep. So feel free to jump in, Erica. Right now, our 6th grade through 8th grade students take the Explorer test. All right. This is the first year that all students and all 8th graders needed to take the Explorer test. We've been doing that, and we do it all the way down to 6th grade, so we can help those students, prepare for those ACTs. And the students also take PLAN in 9th and 10th grade, where the rest of the state takes it in 10th grade only. Last year, Eagle Ridge Academy did ACTs we paid for them. Guess what the state decided to do this year? Pay for all juniors to take the ACTs. So we also want to look at that. And that's kind of, I think, the next slide here. So this year, Eagle Ridge Academy had the 2nd highest composite ACT scores in the state out of all public schools. Last year we also did. Okay? So our average student scored a 27.2 on the ACT.
So who had the highest?
I'm not going to say. Because, quite frankly, I'd rather have taken 5th and beat this school.
That's why I want to know who.
Nova Classical Academy. They beat us by 0.1. Right now, what we're doing What we're doing right now is Wendy Klug, our counselor, is getting all the college prep schools, Breck, Blake, Providence Academy.
We're so far ahead of all the other, are we private?
For one, they don't make that data public, so we're having to do a little research. And so we're going to have that, because that's what we want to do.
Jason, we did just recently pull it, and I won't be able to speak to this because I don't have it right in front of me, but we are we're higher than either Blake or Breck, one of them, and one of them is 2 points higher than us.
2 full points?
Yes, they're 29,
Wow.
2 or something like that. One thing I will point out, when you look at the number of students they test comparatively to the number of students that attend their school, I believe the total kids that they put in that average was 26 students.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know where their other kids are going to, and they don't have to post whatever, they can post whatever average they want, but it was only 26 students that were taken into that average that I pulled. So, I'm still working on that data, but that's some of the things we're starting to look at. The other of the 2 schools was right below us with, I believe, like a 27.1 or something like that. But, so that was between Breck and Blake specifically.
So here's our trend line for ACTs. Traditionally, we've scored right in the 24s. That's a solid score. That's a solid score. Now the last 2 years, we've scored in the 27s. So students and the teachers are doing a wonderful job. This is our academic performance. This is where we're at for our major tests. Other things we're starting to track now is how are we doing on our advanced placement tests. And not just how are we doing. How many of our students are taking these courses and taking these exams? Because like Ms. Powell was saying, that's just as important. We don't just want the top 10% taking these, because then our scores will look, they're inflated. We want more students taking these types of courses. Before we move on to the next piece, what questions, we've talked a lot throughout, but what questions do you have on me at this time? Once? Twice? 5-minute break. Let's do a 5-minute break. Grab something, and then we'll get